For the second weekend in a row, what a nail-biter. Ball State beating South Florida. We'll recap the win over the Bulls, and we'll take a look at this weekend's game against the Kent State Golden Flashes. Third Down Chirp starts right now.
Ball State Sports Link's Third Down Chirp is delivered by Papa John's. Better ingredients, better pizza. Visit papajohns.com today for more info.
Hello and welcome into Week 5 of Third Down Chirp for the 2012 season. I'm your host, Chris Renkel, and as always, joined by Pat Boylan and Timmy Fogarty, our analysts, and for the second week in a row. Wow, what a game for Ball State.
And it's tough to top beating in-state rival IU, but the Cardinals may have done it beating South Florida 2 BCS wins in back-to-back weeks.
Parents weekend last weekend, guys, they moved to 3-1. So, students around campus are excited. We're excited. I just can't wait for MAC play.
But before we get to this weekend's game, let's take a look back at that win over South Florida in an electric Schumann Stadium. Ball State trying to make it 2 in a row against BCS opponents. Early on, all tied up at 3 until Juwan Edwards from 3 yards out pounds in another touchdown in traditional Juwan Edwards fashion. Ball State up 10-9, but B.J. Daniels, the beautiful shovel pass to Lindsey Lamar, takes it in. South Florida starting to come back. You knew they would with that high-powered offense, 10-9. The extra point, the snap is back, it's up, and wait a minute, it's blocked. Joel Cox, his second of the season. Joel Cox making an impact on special teams later. B.J. Daniels, at first half winding down, he's looking for the end zone. Not going to find the guy he wants, it's Brian Jones.
A little desperation pass here, and this one gives Ball State its first INT of the season.
Ball State heads into the half 10-9 with the lead. And in the third quarter, they've been so strong this year, winning from 1 yard out, rushes this one in. Ball State would take a 24-12 lead heading into the fourth quarter, but B.J. Daniels, he would not be denied. Andre Davis jukes out half of the secondary on his way to a touchdown.
And the Cardinals stopped him pretty well throughout most of the game, but not on that play.
B.J. Daniels, such a problem in the second half for Ball State, just couldn't come up with a sack. 2nd and 31, and they convert. And South Florida, their offense just so good throughout this game. You knew it would come down to a nail-biter, and they score again. 2-point conversion good, so it's 27-24 heading into the fourth quarter. Willie Snead would score a touchdown. Ball State goes ahead. Last second, B.J. Daniels, he finds Eric Patterson.
The first real meaningful interception for Ball State could not have come at a bigger time. And how about the Tampa kid, Chris, pulling off the INT against USF?
Call it poetic justice. Ball State wins 31-27, the final, and the second big win of in a row for Ball State. Keith Wenning, 2 touchdowns, 244 yards, no interceptions.
But when you look at Juwan Edwards' numbers, they don't strike you because of only 98 yards and what we're used to seeing from him, but only 16 carries. His yards per game definitely right there.
B.J. Daniels puts up 312 yards, but no really back-breaking plays, so hats off to the Ball State defense.
After the game, here's Lembo and Willie Snead.
Can't say enough about the offense as well. No turnovers, made a lot of big plays, got behind some really good corners, the run game again, and the defense was bend but don't break all day. Well, it's a good confidence booster. 2 BCS wins in a row, but one game at a time. We've got a lot of work to do, and we got a bunch of good teams coming up, starting with Kent State, who's got an outstanding defense.
Oh man, this is a big one. This put Ball State on the map, really, and just executing everything on offense and defense, special teams. This is just a really big win for us today, and I think, this is going to give us a lot of confidence going into our MAC schedule. The cornerback was pressing me, one-on-one coverage, no safety over the top. Keith looked at me, and I looked at him and was like, it's just time to make a play. So, I dropped the first touchdown. It was pretty wide open, and I said, I got to make up for it. All the players on the sideline telling me I'm going to make up for it. And, when I ran the route and the guy was holding my right arm, I pulled out my left hand, snagged it in, and held it against my body, and got the foot in at the same time.
When they reviewed it, did you know you were in?
Yeah, I told everybody, I said I got the left foot in, ball, I came down with the ball, I'm just confident in what I do, I feel like I can make plays like that, I would never lie to my teammates. If I didn't catch it, I would have told them, but, I caught the ball, I was pretty confident, and they stood it.
Now, Eric Patterson definitely had the play of the game, but Pat, if you had to give player of the game to somebody, who would it be?
Well, I'm going to pick a unit that constantly gets overlooked throughout the sport of football. The offensive line for Ball State was nothing short of tremendous in this game. USF came into the game with 9 sacks, none allowed on Keith Wenning. Simply put, the offensive line doesn't play this well, Ball State does not win.
I'm going to stay on the offense as well, guys, but I'm going to go with Willie Snead. 11 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown. And it seems like week after week he keeps making big catch after big catch.
Now, South Florida definitely one of the biggest teams that go into Schumann Stadium in a while, and the win is great for the record, but is it the biggest win in Ball State history?
Well, in terms of talent, I'm not exactly sure if this is the most talented team Ball State's beaten. The jury is still out on if that's the case, but without a doubt, this is the biggest football program that Ball State has ever beaten in its 88-year history. Only the 4th BCS win. The other 3 came against Indiana. South Florida, a Big East opponent, one that was ranked not too long ago. In terms of the football program, guys, this was absolutely, in my opinion, the biggest win that Ball State has ever had.
I'm going to agree with you, Pat, but I'm going to put it tied at first with something. I think in 2008, when Ball State was 10-0 and they played 9-2 Central Michigan, that was a huge game. But Coach Limbo, this was just his 16th game as head coach of the Cardinals. And last week, he beat IU, a Big Ten team. And this week, he beats a Big East team in South Florida, a very talented team. So I think that this is definitely tied for first in my book.
And he was a big reason why Ball State won the game, catching the game-winning touchdown pass in the last couple minutes to solidify the Ball State victory. He's sophomore wide receiver Willie Snead. Timmy Fogarty gives us a closer look at Ball State's young playmaker.
Sophomore receiver Willie Snead makes catching the football look easy. However, his switch from high school quarterback to college receiver, in his mind, was a bit shaky at first.
It was pretty hard for me, I thought I'd be cool with it because my receivers comes from a lot of receivers, so I thought it was gonna be cool. But I had to really get my footwork right again and get stronger, and then transition to the college level. It's a lot faster, and you gotta adjust to it.
Willie made a pretty smooth transition. You'd love to redshirt every freshman, but inevitably you're going to need some guys to play right away, and some guys are going to be the best players and deserve to play right away.
Being unfamiliar with the receiver position, Snead relied strongly on his athleticism.
Last year, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just out there trying to, make plays and go off of talent. But, watching film and, working out hard and, doing all the little things, it really helps you out. And I think it really helped me out because last year I was getting thrown around. I was weighing 185. Now I'm 193. People aren't really throwing me around. And I'm really doing what I need to do and what I've done in the past. So, just all the extra stuff, the little stuff after practice and in the weight room, that really helped me.
The negatives of the position switch were obvious. The positives, though, are often overlooked.
Playing quarterback, you have to have a good relationship with your receivers, and I feel like, I can relate to what Keith is doing and what he's going through, It's tough playing quarterback. You have to read defenses and make the right decisions.
The main reason you love to have ex-quarterbacks in your system is the fact that they've had responsibility on their shoulders in the past. And when you get to the college level, that responsibility gets spread out to all 11 positions. So the fact that Willie has been in a leadership position before helped him come in and play as a freshman.
After a 10-catch performance against Army last season, Snead now has enormous expectations.
It sets my standards up there. People know what I can do now. I can put up 180 yards in one game. So, I have to produce.
I think his confidence was beginning to grow even before the Army game. He came in early, graduated early from high school, knew that getting a jump start on his college football career was a priority for him, and was really able to take advantage of being here in the winter and spring.
Both Coach Limbo and Snead think his off-season workouts have been key.
Extra work on my footwork because my feet were really slow. I wear a size 15, so my feet are, kind of heavy. So I got to do jump ropes, ladders, and all the extra stuff to make sure my feet are quick so I can, make an illusion that I'm going so fast, but I'm not really that fast.
He's really been able to take advantage of the strength and conditioning program under the guidance of Dave Feely, our strength coach. And Willie is out here this spring, and he's playing with greater confidence because his body's allowing him to do more things.
Entering his second season at receiver, Snead is setting the bar high.
I feel like we can do big things this year. I feel like I can do big things, and I feel like, you know, if I just, you know, just keep working hard in the summer, you know, not settling. You know, if I drop a pass, that just shows that's something I need to work on. You know, you're going to see a whole different Willie Snead from last year.
For Ball State Sports Link, I'm Timmy Fogarty.
Now, Ball State wasn't the only team in the Mid-American Conference to get a big win this weekend. It was a weekend that would effectively be called Attack of the MAC as we take a look around the rest of the conference presented by Fox College Sports. Starting in the MAC East, Kent State over Buffalo 23-7. The Bulls offense just atrocious.
4 for 22 goes Alex Zordich, the quarterback. One of his 4 completions and the lone touchdown was on a Hail Mary.
Tennessee over Akron 47-26, but the Zips were in it till the end.
Akron was in this for 3 quarters, but just in the 4th quarter, Tennessee, too much firepower.
In the MAC West, wow, a lot of wins. Central Michigan over Iowa 32-31.
4 of the 6 MAC West teams beat a BCS conference opponent. The most surprising, in my opinion, Central Michigan, who's been overlooked, beating Iowa at Iowa.
Northern Illinois over Kansas 30-23. Huskies looking strong.
Northern always seems to hang around with the big boys, and in this one, Charlie Weiss and crew just couldn't beat the MAC team.
And when the carnage was over, as we take a look at the MAC standings, 4th consecutive week in a row, your Ball State Cardinals top of the MAC West.
And look at that MAC West, just the overall record. Only one of the 6 teams is under 500, and that's Eastern Michigan, who hung with Michigan State the whole weekend last week.
All right, and heading into this week, it's not going to be easy for Ball State as they face a very good Kent State team as we take a look head-to-head, starting with the quarterbacks. Keith Wenning and Spencer Keith is the official starter on the depth chart, but it could be either him or David Fisher.
Yeah, it could be either of those guys, and we'll talk more about that comparison later. But when you look, it's really the battle of the Keiths here. Wenning with double the passing yards, and he has 5 touchdowns to Spencer Keith's 0. Wenning definitely the bigger playmaker of the two.
Keith Wenning the last 2 weeks has looked phenomenal and up to the expectations that everyone thinks, averaging 215 yards a game and has 5 TDs this season.
At the running back position, this game features several good ones, starting with Jawan Edwards and Dree Archer.
And Jawan Edwards, the go-to back in the Cardinal system. We're 4 games through the year, and he's still averaging over 6 yards a carry.
Archer, arguably one of the most explosive players this Ball State team will face this year. Last week, 127 yards and a touchdown. And Archer has the kick return team ranked 2nd in the entire country.
And at the wide receiver position, Willie Snead finally becoming the #1 threat we thought he could be at the beginning of the year.
And when you look at Snead versus Boyle, what really sticks out, Snead a sophomore, Boyle a freshman. They're both very young, but you're right, Chris. Willie Snead is starting to step apart a little bit more.
Kent State's receivers coach is Thad Jemison, a former Ohio State receiver, and he really likes Josh Boyle. Boyle 184 yards and a touchdown, and like you said, Chris, only a freshman.
And in our head-to-head on the defense, really the strong point of this Kent State Golden Flash team is defense.
And how many MAC teams have a better defense than an offense? The answer might be one, and it might be Kent State.
Kent State not only 2nd in kick returns in the country, but 2nd in the country in turnover margin. Their offense doesn't turn the ball over, and that Flash's defense forces some turnovers, so could pose some problems for Ball State.
Now, we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of our head-to-head segment with the quarterbacks. Kent State runs a 2-quarterback system, not something you usually see out of any Division I college football team, and that is Spencer Keith and David Fisher. Now, the 2-quarterback system, some teams have tried it, and they really haven't found much success with it, but somehow Kent State pulls it off.
Well, Spencer Keith is the guy who's been the starter almost since day 1 at Kent State. He started as a freshman. This is his 4th year starting in the system, but the progression with him hasn't been that great. And if you look, he doesn't make many mistakes, but he also doesn't make many big plays. 0 touchdowns. He struggles in the red zone, so they're possibly trying to take a look here at Fisher, who, while he makes more mistakes, also can make things happen on the ground as well.
Guys, off the top of my head, I can really only think of one college football team that I remember, and that's with Chris Leak and Tim Tebow that was successful with this system. Spencer Keith, it's just so tough for a quarterback to get in a rhythm of any sort when another guy's breathing down your neck.
Now, Timmy, you're being a former college quarterback at Dayton. Could you see yourself working in this 2-quarterback system, and what goes through your head when you got to come off the field?
Well, no, because of a couple reasons. One of them, I think the biggest reason is that it's just so tough to get in any sort of rhythm like I touched on. And, you know, when you play the game, you get used to the defense. You get used to the speed of the game, what your receivers are going to do. And then you make a mistake one series, then the next series, a guy like David Fisher's in. So it's just extremely difficult, Chris, to get in any sort of rhythm and feel comfortable in the pocket.
All right, should be a great game. Kickoff at 12 noon from Dick's Stadium in Kent, Ohio. If you can't make the game, or even if you do, listen to the three of us on SportsLink Radio 91.3 WCRD and WCRD.net for all the play-by-play action. All right, players to watch this week. Pat, who you got?
Well, for me, I'm going to go with the guy who's kind of been the star the past 2 weeks. We've been talking a lot about him already, but I'm going with Willie Snead. And for the pure reason of this, Ball State without two incredible catches by Willie, and here's another one that I'm not even including in those two, but his catch late in the game against Indiana, his catch late in the game against South Florida, he doesn't make either of those. Ball State's probably looking at 1-3 straight in the face. If he can get open and provide Keith Wenning with some opportunities against a tough defense, Ball State's going to have a lot more success moving the football against Kent.
Mine's going to be a guy that's his group has struggled, and that's in Eric Patterson in the secondary. The secondary has given up 323 yards a game through the air, but Kent State not a very powerful team throwing the football. Spencer Keith, if he throws an interception, he's lost his last 12, guys. 12 games when he throws a pick in a game. So if this team can force turnovers, and the Golden Flashes don't turn it over that much, but if Eric Patterson and them can mix up their coverages, force some turnovers, I think it could pose some problems for Kent State.
Really not a whole lot of weaknesses on the Ball State team during that South Florida game, but if you had to pick one player to improve, who would it be?
Well, you said it. When you win a game against South Florida, a BCS level team, a Big East level team, you can't have many guys struggle. In Ball State, you really struggle to find someone who did just that. My pick is going to be Kenneth Lee, and here's why. He really came out against IU and I thought played pretty well. Got a sack, was in on a lot of plays, and by no means did he play badly against South Florida, but you just didn't see his name called quite as much, making tackles and being in on the play. I think this is a guy at the weak side linebacker, blitzes a lot, and a guy who could get at the quarterback, and I think if he can get at Spencer Keith or whoever the Kent State quarterback is, Ball State could have a lot of success defensively because they struggle to move the football as it is.
Mine's going to be a player like Horatio Banks, not someone who's struggled at all. A great start to the season for him, but I think this game he can really come out and shine. Horatio showed it against Clemson. He had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Last week, 10 carries for 42 yards, and he has 3 TDs this season, but he's so explosive, and he can literally find a hole and just bust through. So not really a player to improve, but a player that I think can really stand out this weekend.
And it's important to remember that Brandon Oliver from Buffalo really gave this Kent State defense fits before he had to come out of the game with an injury early. All right, keys to a Cardinal victory, what do you got?
Well, for me, it's going to be the play on the offensive line for Ball State. When you look at how well that unit played as a whole last week against South Florida, I mean, that was, in my opinion, the biggest reason why the Cardinals won. Keith Wenning had time to sit back there and pick you apart. I don't care who the defense is. If you give Wenning 5, 6, 7 seconds to throw the football, he's going to beat you more often than not. Roosevelt Nix, one of the top defensive players in this conference, is on the Kent State D-line. If Ball State can keep him under control, give Wenning time to throw, the backs room to run, they're going to win again.
My biggest key, guys, is going to be on the other side of the ball. The big boys, the defensive line, Jonathan Newsom, Nathan Ollie and company. I just think that with the Kent State team that struggles throwing the football, and they've thrown, I think, 1 touchdown this season. So with the Kent State team that struggles to throw the football, I think that if they can get in the background and force some turnovers, that Ball State has a good chance.
All right, he was definitely a key to the win against Indiana. Steven Schott, the kicker, fifth-year senior, making the game-winning kick, of course, against the Hoosiers. We showed you a sneak preview of this story last week. Now it's time for the full story. Here's a look at Kicking Under Pressure, produced by Brad Daly and myself.
Here comes Steven Schott. Come on, Schott. He hit from 51 earlier today. This will be 42 yards from the far left half. This is not an easy kick. He's got to turn it.
Pressure. You can't see it, you can't hear it. But when the game is on the line, you can feel it. Pressure is something Ball State kicker Steven Schott knows all about.
Growing up, it's like life or death.
Massillon, Ohio, where pro football was born, where the citizens bleed the orange and black of the Tigers. It's a place that from the minute a baby boy is born, the pressure is on to play and succeed in football. This is where Steven Schott first found his love for the game.
The town just goes crazy. There's signs up in all the buildings. The players have their pictures up on local businesses. I mean, if you win, the town's going to love you. If you lose, they're going to hate you. Just growing up, I've always just, I've loved that. I've loved the pressure that's always been on me as as a player.
One of the games when he was probably 11, when we went to it, because we would go to Massillon games because we couldn't go to a Fairless game because we had to go to a real football game. Yeah. So when we went to the Massillon game, he saw David Abdul kick a 50-some yarder.
57, I think. It was a school record at the time.
And he came home and he started kicking the football.
I used to walk over across the street from my house. There's a basketball court, and I used to try to kick the football into the basketball hoop.
And then he started, I want a field goal in the front yard. I want a field goal in the front yard. And if you know Stephen, he is relentless. Relentless. 3 months after that, the field goal post was up. Stephen was always football, 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 Massillon, Massillon, Massillon. So when it came time for him to go to school, he chose Massillon.
There had only been one other 4-year starter at Massillon before Stephen, you know, 100 years or so. And the coach actually told us, you know, before the season that Stephen was going to be the starting kicker.
First impression, I got chills. You know, running out of that tunnel at Massillon as a 15-year-old little skinny runt.
I have to tell you, the first time I saw him, the first game when he was a freshman, he was all in black pants, black top, and he turned to the side and he literally disappeared. He weighed 120, and I was scared to death.
The feeling I had is amazing. Just so many fans yelling, and you know, I'll always remember that, my first time running out on that field at Paul Brown.
The pressure is always greatest on the final week of the regular season, with the rivalry that dates back to 1894, a time simply known as McKinley Week.
Massillon-McKinley, you know, it's week 10 every year. The rush you get against them is like no other rush, no other game. It's one of the most intense rivalries in the nation, I would have to say.
His junior year, Stephen made a 47-yard kick in the third quarter to put Massillon ahead 10-7. There was no more scoring the rest of the game, and the Tigers won.
They were highly ranked, and Massillon was...
And they were undefeated.
Yeah, I think they were undefeated.
They were undefeated at the time.
Yeah. We didn't have a very good year, but it all comes, when you don't have a good year, it still comes down to that game 10, and you can make your whole year right there.
Stephen would beat McKinley 3 times in 5 meetings and ended up as the all-time leading kicker in Massillon's 118-year history.
You know, it's hard to, you know, to stay humble. You know, everyone's in your ear saying how good you are and how great you are. Like I said, growing up, there's always that pressure on you. There's pressure to be good, there's pressure to win. So I think at an early age, I learned that, you know, if I want to be good at this, I'm going to have to handle that and, you know, do my job the right way. Especially when I've gotten here, because, you know, this is Division I football now, and, you know, you're not a little kid anymore.
Normally, it would be a huge gap, but playing for Massillon, there's a lot of pressure.
I mean, his stadium is full every Friday night.
Every Friday night there was between 10 and 16,000 people
there. And then each McKinley game,
there was over 20,000.
Fawcett Stadium would be sold out.
You know, I just focus on what my target is and where I want the ball to go, and we just go from there.
He totally amazed me. Amazed me with his mental capacity to handle that pressure.
You know, I take pride in what I do in kicking field goals, and it's just great that I had the opportunity to, you know, kick field goals in those games and help my team win. Massillon's always a special place, and it'll always be a special place to me. I love being from that town. I love growing up there. You know, the history that's there, it just gives you that sense of pride, and, you know, you want to do well for those guys who went before you and the guys who are going to play after you. You want to, you know, leave that legacy.
Well, we're definitely proud. I mean, go ahead.
Every day, he's made us proud. Every day, in every way.
Yeah, it's
made me cry.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride, and
it was quite a ride, and it still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Devon to the hold, the snap is there, it's down, the kick is up, it's on the way, it's got the leg, and it is good!
Pressure. It can break down a player or make them the hero. But pressure to Stephen Schott is nothing new. It's just business as usual.
Stephen Schott is a hero! Wow! Oh my!
For Ball State Sports Link, I'm Chris Rankel.
It's now time for our What's Chirping question of the week. You can tweet a question at Third Down Chirp or hashtag #TweetPete. And if we choose your question and answer it on air, you get a free pizza courtesy of Papa John's. Our question this week comes from C. Jones ZI. How big of an impact has Jonathan Newsom made since he started playing this year at Ball State? He's only played in 2 games, but pretty good.
He has his 2 sacks, but when he can get in the backfield, to me, even when he's not getting a sack, pressuring the quarterback caused B.J. Daniels many early throws last week.
Oh, and that also forces the offense to totally go away from him, pretty much cutting the field in half. So he's made a gigantic impact so far.
Great question, great answers, guys. If your question didn't get picked this week, remember to tweet question next week for another chance to win a free Papa John's pizza. That's at Down Chirp or hashtag #TweetPete. And for the latest in Ball State news and stories, be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Just search Ball State Sports Link. All right, guys, prediction time, standings. Timmy, you won last week, even though both of you didn't predict the Ball State win. So Timmy now leads 10-8. Pat, you can tie it up this week. No pressure. What's your prediction?
Well, first of all, I am tying it up this week. Second of all, my prediction, 27-7. Ball State gets the win. I think if they can get in the late 20s in the points, Kent State's offense might not be good enough to match them.
Our predictions are just way too similar in general. I'm going to say Ball State wins 31-21. I just think Keith Winning is looking too good right now. The running game's looking great. I just don't think Kent State can hang around.
And to find out who won that prediction, you're going to have to listen to the game. So remember, 12 o'clock noon kickoff at Dick's Stadium from Kent. Listen to the three of us, SportsLink Radio, 91.3 WCRD and WCRD.net. And that's going to wrap up our show for this week. You can catch us next week on Fox College Sports, Comcast Indiana, and WIPB-TV. Remember, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for the latest in Ball State news and stories. So, for Pat Boylan and Timmy Fogarty and all of us here at SportsLink, until next week, have a good weekend and go Cardinals.